Books. I hope you're having a fantastic week. Hey, today I want to talk a little bit about high school, using Master Books curriculum to homeschool your high school student. In the Moms of Master Books group, we have a lot of younger moms, millennial type moms, and it's well known to marketing that millennial moms are comfortable talking about their experience with companies and products. And so in our culture, in the Moms of Master Books, there's a lot of moms who are comfortable talking about using Master Books with grades 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, the elementary experience. We do have a lot of homeschoolers who use Master Books curriculum for high school students, and it just doesn't get as much exposure, I guess, in the Moms of Master Books. So as we go into 2019, it is something that I'd like to discuss a little bit more as well to help serve the homeschool mom. And if you are homeschooling using Master Books curriculum, I'd invite you to post pictures of your high school student. Tell us your successes. We really want to celebrate your homeschool experience as well. So let's talk a little bit about high school. High school starts at 9th grade. Typically, a student would start earning credit when they hit 9th grade. So they have 4 years to earn credit, or about the time they would turn 15. So maybe they're not necessarily saying algebra and they're doing principles of mathematics, but they're a 15-year-old. You would classify that as maybe a pre-algebra or a general math for that student, and you count that as credit. So you typically want high school level courses, but you start earning credits when you turn 15 as well. And sometimes you just, as an educator, you are the school. You're the one who issues the credits. You create the courses. If it's a high school level textbook, say Jacob's Algebra, that's a high school level textbook. It's 1 credit of material, and that would be the equivalent. With a pre-algebra course, those courses would typically be like a junior high level or a 7th and 8th grade course. You would be creating more of you would be awarding a high school level course. So maybe you would do a combined Principles of Math 1, Principles of Math 2. That would be your pre-algebra course. It's a little bit more intense than what a 7th or 8th grader would use. So there's definitely, when it comes to credits, what we're referring to is what would be called a Carnegie unit. That's typically anywhere from 120 hours of instruction to 180 hours of instruction, classroom instruction. Now, a lot of courses or textbooks are created for something like a 24-week schedule, and you know, 120 hours worth of material. All of Master Books courses, whether it's elementary or high school level, are created for 180 days, a 36-week schedule. And in doing that, we make the course lessons a little bit shorter. So a lot of times when you look and you see how much time a student would be required, it doesn't reach an hour. It might be 40 minutes or 30 minutes of typical classroom time that would take. That's a lot of times because we're doing it over 180 days as opposed to 120 days. So we've got an extra 60 days or 30 days, depending on how you calculate that, to go into your credit course. So I'm in a different room today, and so I have Brittany is in the room with me, and I'm hearing the clicking of the mouse. And if it's too much, let us know. I don't think it should be. I'm attacking her space, so so she has to endure me for a few minutes. Okay, so when you build a transcript, and what we recommend is going and visiting hslda.org. I will post a link in this video as well for homeschooling through high school. They have videos. They have videos about how to issue a credit, how to build a transcript. They have sample transcripts. They have blank transcripts that you can use. They have information about what states require, because different states have different requirements. So in this video, I'm not going to provide legal information or any information about your state, I would highly recommend that you visit hslda.org. The other thing that we recommend is if your student is college bound, that you look at some of the students at some of the colleges your student may be interested in attending and see what their admission requirements are. What are they looking for? Are they looking for 4 science credits with labs? Are they looking for 4 English? They'll generally tell you what kind of transcript they're looking for, and you want to begin preparing your student's transcript for admission into the universities that you might be interested in. If it's a general diploma, a lot of times that's something much more simple. HSLDA has a course recommendation like 4 English credits, 3 math credits, 2 to 3 history credits, 2 to 3 science credits, foreign language 1 to 2 credits, physical education 1 to 2 credits, fine arts, which would be art, music, drama, photography, etc., 1 to 2 credits, 6 credits in electives. That would be like life skills, critical thinking, world religions and cults, apologetics, logic. Those would be electives. So your total credits that you would be earning over the 4 years that your student would be looking at would be about 20 to 22. That would be for a general diploma. If you're looking at a high school diploma for college prep, you're looking at something closer to 24 to 28 credits. So it would be a much higher load, and typically it's going to be a little bit more intense courses, right? It's going to be like for English, you would be doing literature composition, rhetoric, creative writing, journalism, debate, things like that. The 4 credits there, 4 credits for math, 4 credits for history, 4 credits for science with labs, and so you'd be a little bit more intense. So from a transcript perspective, it really isn't that complicated. And as a teacher, you have the ability to be creative, right? So if I'm going to teach a course in writing, and I use writing strands as the basic, and I know that I have to have about 128 hours or 120 hours of application through the course of the year. That includes discussion, coursework, homework, any application of that material that the student is going to do. And of course, our courses are built, excuse me, over the 180 days, so it's a little bit less than an hour, and you can build that as a creative writing or descriptive writing course, however you choose to put that on the transcript, even if it's just English composition. And then if you use a course like, say, Jensen's grammar, that would be grammar. If you use the vocabulary, you'd have vocabulary. If you use the literature, you could put in literature, and those would be your 4 credits. So I know I'm throwing a lot out there really quick, and I see Rachel Smith is part of this conversation. We're blessed to have her as a moderator because she does help people with transcripts, and she also has high school students, so she's involved in that as well. So if she has any comments, Rachel, you're free to jump in and participate, but we definitely want to start facilitating more of the high school discussion. So let's talk a little bit about Master Books curriculum and the high school student. For math, we have 2 math courses available right now. We have Jacob's Algebra and Jacob's Geometry. Both of those are highly recognized courses for instruction. We have charter schools that use those. We have private schools that use those. That course has been printed and published for, I think, almost 30 years. So it's had experience and proven in the classroom. Our Principles of Mathematics 1 is, you pumpkin.
I didn't mean to do that. I'm done.
Our Principles of Mathematics course 1 and 2, some people will use that as a pre-algebra and use that as a pre-algebra or general math 1 type course on a transcript, depending on what you're looking at. If you're a general diploma, that's where they would put that. If they're doing it in, say, 9th grade. So then they would do that in 9th grade, maybe algebra in 10th grade, geometry in 11th grade, then a business math may also be substituted. Business math, accounting math, consumer math can also be interwoven into those 3 to 4 credits for math. But our 2 primary math courses right now would be Jacob's Algebra and Jacob's Geometry. And those are both meant to be independent nicely done. We have the DVD courses as well, which are a little bit more homespun, but I like it because they're not formal, and those subjects are already intimidating enough. And I like a video series that takes the sterileness and the intensity out of it and makes it more accessible to the average student. So we have those for math, and that's there. Some people will ask, well, where do we go from there? Generally, you would do like a college. You could do a dual enrollment college algebra, which would be equivalent to a high school algebra 2. Would be something if your student was college bound, getting them into a dual enrollment program. And that could be done in a number of avenues, whether it's online learning, a local community college, or maybe an online program with a university that your student would like to attend. The other thing you could do, we have recommendations. Dr. Dale Callahan, who does the teaching series for the Jacobs Algebra and Geometry, he has recommendations as well for a textbook to move into the next level. We're talking on the horizon about having an Algebra 2 to move towards. It's not on the books yet. It's not something that's fully been recognized. It's just the discussions are beginning. So that's what we would recommend for that. Now, some people will say, but it's not a series, and we would rather have a series. We understand that. When we've talked to different teachers and professors, the one thing that we've heard is a lot of times algebra has a certain standards. When you finish Algebra 1, high school Algebra 1, there are certain things that you should know before going into a geometry or an Algebra 2. And as long as the textbooks that you have teach those standards, it really doesn't matter what you move into next. And I would say if you did Jacobs Algebra and Jacobs Geometry, you're pretty much prepared to go college level, Algebra 1, or to any program. And I would say our students have, in our home, have done different programs. I know we've used like Switched on Schoolhouse, and we've used teaching textbooks. We've used some different programs. I would put this above those programs as far as what your student is going to have. And because there's a lot more application, your student's actually going to have a better grasp of how to use the algebra than just maybe knowing some of the procedures that they would know otherwise. Okay, just making sure. Okay. So then let's talk, so we talked math, let's talk about English. With English or language, we have a lot of different options. Typically with language, you're looking at courses like literature, composition, creative writing, vocabulary to prepare them for the SAT, ACT test, that type of thing. And so we have a number of options to use. We have writing strands, which definitely could be used as a composition. Because it does have a grammar as you go component, you could use that as a composition grammar course, but it would still only be 1 credit. Now, the reading strands is incorporated into that. You could certainly look at optional ways of thickening that program to give a credit for creative writing and a credit for literature if you chose literature books that were required more hours, right? So we're looking at, say, 120 hours of instruction for the course, 120 to 180 hours overall. If a student was a great reader and was doing reports and that type of thing, and you were actually looking at, they're probably spending more like you know, an hour and a half a day to 2 hours a day on the composition and the reading component, then you could issue a component for writing and create for composition and a component for literature. So that would be one option. We have the Jensen's grammar, which has been available in the homeschool market for a long time. Master Books took it a couple years ago. We added a daily schedule. We went through and made some of the instruction a little bit clearer. We laid it out so that the format is a little bit easier to follow. And one of the recent visits to a big reseller, what they said is everything Master Books touches, they make better, which I love that, so I love sharing that. I think Jensen's grammar is one of those that when Master Books touched it, it was a great product. We made it a much greater product by bringing our method to it and cleaning it up. It's designed for independent use. We do have the DVDs. So you could use format writing, which is a little bit more of a chromatic writing course, where the writing strands is more descriptive. The format writing would be more formalized. You know, here's how you write a paragraph. Here's what you put in your paragraphs. Now you have a format essay. If your student does better with a formulaic type approach to things. So you could definitely use that. For the course, we have vocabulary, format writing, we have the Jensen's grammar, and there's one other that could be used as well. Punctuation. So you could actually use the punctuation in there as well if your student had an issue, but I probably would go more with the vocabulary, writing, and grammar in those areas. We also have the Stobaugh American Literature and World Literature, which cover more of the classics and worldview in the classics. So you could do the literature. We have Worldviews in Conflict, which presents major classics and like Mark Twain and their worldview, which could loosely be, well, I don't know that you'd want to use it in a grammar sense. That probably would fit more into the history and a philosophy, cultural philosophy or history. So scratch that note. Okay, so we talked a little bit math, a little bit of language. Let's see. Okay. I have Jacob's Elementary. Angela says, I have Jacob's Elementary Algebra. Can that follow teaching textbook 7, or does my child need more math? Your child probably needs more math. 7, teaching textbook 7 would be 7th grade. Algebra would be in 9th grade. I would recommend taking the placement test for the Principles of Mathematics. You can do that in Accelerated. You could do Principles of Math 1 and 2 in 1 year in your 8th grade. Or you could move from teaching textbook 7 into Principles of Mathematics 2 if they had the knowledge. But do the placement test. Teaching textbooks is good at what teaching textbooks does. It offers a very doable solution for homeschool families, and sometimes that works depending on the season that you're in. But Jacob's is definitely going to be a much more intense program. And so you want to make sure that your student understands the basics, the pre-algebra concepts, before moving into algebra, or they're going to be frustrated. Okay? Okay. Just making sure. Okay. Okay. So we've talked math, we've talked language, we'll talk a little bit about history. So with the history curriculum, right now we have 2 main options, which would be the Stobaugh American History or the World History. We do have British history, but that probably won't be continuing just because it's not as popular. So we have those 2 courses. If you're going to do the Stobaugh History and Literature, I would probably recommend looking at, if you're doing the history, American history and world history, I would look at maybe doing the literature alongside it. The 2 of those combined is actually enough coursework for 3 credits. The history itself isn't as robust as when you combine it with the literature, and the literature covers that time period. So they're getting a much fuller worldview experience than just the American history and world history alone, but you could certainly do that. We do have some homeschool families that are combining Angela Odell's materials with this is what happens when you take over someone's office, and
I'm not trying.
you're welcome to continue working. So they'll do like the American history, they'll take the 3 books, 1, 2, and 3, which would normally be done over a 3-year period in elementary, and they'll use that as an American history spine, and then they'll add some additional research, some additional reports to thicken it up and do the 3 years in 1 year. The world history, the world story, those 3 books are a lot more robust. They were designed for 6th, 7th, and 8th, but they're actually pretty robust. And if you took those 3 books and combined them, maybe did some additional reading, some additional research and reports, I think you would definitely have a pretty robust world history as well. And I know Angela Odell has some alternative lesson plans on her website to accommodate that. In addition to that, typically there's in a high school transcript, you have a American government course or Constitution course, which we have a new civics course coming out, which I'm really excited about, and you're going to hear a lot more about that in the future, because I recommend that not just for your students, but I recommend that as a family study. The more I learn about the Constitution and how brilliant the founders were, even if America were to dissolve and our Constitution was no more, the principles that they used to write that document and to build an organization, the United States, around are pretty remarkable. So we have that, which would be the equivalent of a 1 semester course. Even if it's done over a year, it would still be 1/2 credit. And then we have the economics course, which you would do in the alternate. So you have economics and civics. Typically, each a 1/2 credit would be 1 year. And then you could definitely do something like Worldviews in Conflict, which I would say is something along the line of a cultural or philosophy type history course. We have Christian, there's a couple of other history substitutes that you could throw in if you wanted to have like a 4th credit for your history course. Okay, let's see. Science. So science, we started very out of the box. When Master Books started, we wanted to use the materials that we had and create lesson plans for those materials. Many of our materials have been written by PhDs and masters of theology and educators. And so we took those materials, we created lesson plans, which are now called teacher guides, and use those. So we have advanced pre-med, which a lot of families have used as a biology curriculum. We have the life science course, Origins, which is my students' favorite course, and we've had fantastic feedback on that course. So that would be a good alternative science course. We also have the astronomy course, which uses a number of resources that Master Books has on young Earth creation, astronomy from a young Earth creation perspective, and by Dr. Jason Lyle, who is a brilliant astrophysicist who shares the worldview of a young Earth creation, a biblical worldview in astronomy. And a number of states like Texas have actually now made it a requirement to have one non-lab science course. Astronomy would be a perfect course, a recognized course for that spot. So we started with some out-of-the-box courses. We have a general science, the general science 1, general science 2. Some people have used those for high school. There's science concepts that other people have used as a high school course, especially if you're doing a general diploma where your student is going to go to the military or perhaps they're going right into the career field. You could use something like that if one of the higher level courses like chemistry or one of those were kind of out of reach. But because of the demand and because our worldview is so important and science is really kind of who we are, we began producing the master's class science. So last year we released the chemistry course. We were seeing some fantastic reviews coming back on that course. That actually has labs built into it. And I love, love, love that course, and that when you actually grasp the applied science, like it's not just in a textbook, you're actually looking at in our food, science in our food, right? Or the science around us and chemistry around us. Chemistry is really the study of matter. And using the periodic table of elements, he doesn't teach to memorize the periodic table of elements. He teaches you to use it. And once you understand the periodic table of elements, you can just, it's so amazing. And so I love his style of teaching chemistry. So that is a more traditional chemistry approach. The labs are integrated, so it would be a science with labs, but the course would be 1 credit, not 1.5 or 2 credits. It would be 1 credit for the science. They're in the process right now of doing the biology course, the masterclass biology course. And again, this is a more traditional approach to biology, and something that I would recommend. If someone's outside the door, you're welcome to come in, especially if it's Kristen. So, you want to come join me?
I wasn't planning on it, but I guess I can.
Yeah.
I was just dropping off some things to you.
How awesome. I'm roping everybody in today.
Are you?
Yeah, I don't
You're
have
in
a
a
stool
different
for you. Would you like
spot.
to sit? I know. If you stand and I sit, we're about the same height.
Okay.
Awesome. So that's what we
That
look like.
works.
Yeah. But there's our camera.
Okay.
So,
Good
okay.
morning
So,
or afternoon.
so the biology course is I'm really excited about it. It's a more traditional biology course,
Mhm.
but something that I like about it is we actually purchased like this really expensive microscope. Our
Yes.
techie, Chris, our IT guy, he went out and found this amazing lighting and all this stuff. So then we bought the slides and he's taking pictures of it.
Yes.
So, and then we're going to do a lab book.
We are. That will follow. So the course will come out first,
Yes.
and then the lab book will come out. And what the intention is to take pictures of all of the slides
Mhm.
and put them into this lab book. So if you're not actually doing the labs, you still have beautiful images of what those slides would look like under the microscope.
Right. Because in the real world, there are families who don't spend $300 on a microscope.
Right,
There are families who want to do the labs.
right.
But when you have 9 kids and you're running a business and you're trying to pastor a church and you're taking care of your parents and the rest of the world you're trying to save, labs kind of, they're the best laid plans.
Right.
We want to make sure that your children experience the full experience of what a lab would be, even if they can't necessarily do that. If you're the family who has a microscope and all of that, we want that.
We have a microscope, but I would still use this lab book because sometimes you're not exactly certain what the kids are supposed to be looking at, and they're not sure what they're supposed to be seeing. And so how I personally would use it is I would have the microscope there, I would have the biology course there, then I would have this lab book sitting next to the microscope. And I would point to the image and say, this is what you should be seeing on the slide.
Right.
And then having the student look. And then they know what they're looking for, what what they're supposed to be learning about, and then getting to see it in real life. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You either have the book or you do the labs.
Yeah.
I think it's really versatile. And the other thing that's going to be built into this lab book is it's not just for use with the biology. It's actually a book that's going to teach how to use a microscope, how to do lab procedures, those sorts of things.
Okay.
It's not written yet, so don't hold me to every little detail, but that's the idea that's behind creating this book.
It's like a supplement lab book that could be used with actually any curriculum. Chris showed me some of the pictures, and a traditional microscope, you see a one-dimensional view.
Mm-hmm.
With the lighting that he has, you actually see like an enhanced dimension, so you can see like the raises and that type of thing. So it's not just a standard kind of a plain view. It actually has an enhancement. So that's the biology that we would recommend, like a 9th grade student would take, and that should be that. The goal is to have that available before convention season, which would be available in March or April. And I think that with the chemistry, with the astronomy, and then the next one that we'll release with the master's class will be a physics is the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So we will have a traditional science, but we also have an outside the box science. It's very applied, very apologetic based. And if your student has come through, if you're doing God's Design for Science, if you're doing the general science, or you're doing anything like the applied, some people will do the applied engineering, which is based on biomimicry, looking at God's creation to develop science. That would be something that a lot of people use in like 9th grade, and it's really good for somebody who's not really interested in science. Like if you have a boy or a girl who's not really interested in science and you kind of want to awaken that a little bit, that applied science course is one of those that's going to like wake them up. There's some hands-on experiments in it, but it's really like you look at different bugs to see how God created them and how science is copying and creating technology based on design
Oh,
in nature.
it's amazing. I mean, everything from airplanes to shoes. The one that I always remember is the one on the Sperry shoes and how those boat shoes came about. And it was mimicking the design of a dog's ability to walk on a boat even with wet surfaces and not slip.
Yes.
And so God created the pads of a dog's feet to be able to, walk on various surfaces and not slip. And so it looks at a lot of different things in nature and how we've used it, copying those things. I mean, that's fun.
Yeah.
That doesn't scream science, but it is science.
Right. It's an applied science.
Yes.
And it's something that our core is, we want your student to get excited. If they get excited about science, then they'll just start doing it. You don't have to motivate them. They're going to be more motivated. The traditional model is we try to put our kids in a box and we tell them, you're going to be excited about biology and you're going to get an A. Well, for some people who like pleasing teachers and enjoy school.
I like the material.
Okay, so it isn't all about pleasing teachers. But some people are motivated that way. Other people are motivated by being interested in it and having it kind of waking up and being more applied to them. Yeah, and so there's alternatives. If your student isn't motivated to do science, there's enough. You can find so much good that we have.
Oh yeah, we have great courses.
Okay, so we covered math, we covered English, we covered history, and we've covered science. The electives, we have a number of different electives. Electives could be logic. It could be the worldviews in conflict.
You could even use the astronomy.
You could use some of the science courses as the life science could be considered. You could do that as an elective if you wanted to.
Yeah, some of the history courses, like the one that has the pharaohs in it, the pharaohs and kings.
So we would typically do like Bible, those type of things.
Bible, working on those solutions. But yeah, anything extra. You could do traditional electives or non-traditional electives. You could do whatever your state requires. You could do things that your student is really interested in. It could be in areas that they just love, or it could be in areas that they're actually interested in making a career out of. Yeah.
I just realized we have to try to smile. The last picture got us and we look like we were fighting.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. Facebook's gonna grab it. And I'm chewing gum too. That's not good.
So, okay, so with electives, we have a number that are of products that are listed. Of course, the new Constitution course is one that would be, well, that's history. The logic would be one that I would highly recommend.
Yeah, that'll be just one of my core required electives is the logic for our kids.
I think worldview, world cults and religions is a great course because I'm amazed in pastoring and even just being in ministry how infected the Christian worldview is by other cults and religions.
Yes.
And I think it's so important that we understand that as educators, that here's the worldview that this is being brought to us by. And then the logic that helps us be able to look at the intelligent way to argue our faith and understand the fallacies that are being presented to us. And then I think some awareness of like worldviews in conflict. It's an intense course, but understanding how people like Karl Marx or Mark Twain or some of the influencers in our culture have influenced postmodernism for our kids, and understanding that before they go to university, because they're going to be taught those philosophies. Interesting story. We love the apologetics model of education, and all of Master Books, as we've talked in the past, all of Master Books material is very apologetic. It goes to, in the beginning, God, and because in the beginning, God, He sets the rules and we live in His creation. He's not part of our creation. So I'm listening to a podcast, and it's very much on life coaching. And my son is in the back. How old is he? Eli?
Oh, Eli. Which son? You got a lot of sons. He's 9.
Okay, so my 9-year-old, we're on the way, we're listening to it. And my 9-year-old says, I disagree with your worldview, Father.
You gotta know our 9-year-old.
Yeah. So I stopped the podcast, and we had a really intelligent conversation about why the author of the podcast, why her worldview was flawed compared to a biblical worldview. And he was 100%. I was taking the information and applying it to a biblical worldview, but I wasn't really thinking of his approach. But when he started presenting it, and I really got to articulate it in that, it was awesome. And I look forward to my kids asking me often, is your worldview right? Are we in the right worldview, right? Because from time to time, we're around people that are even Christians that have compromised worldviews. And so I think it's so important. I think it's so important.
Brittany's worried you think she has a compromised worldview.
You want to get in this?
Okay.
I think it's so important. Like we sometimes will take our kids and we'll take them to church and we'll leave them with people. We don't really always know their worldview. And sometimes even as a pastor, I can say that my worldview wasn't always biblical. Sometimes it was infected by tradition, or it was infected by a secular college experience, or maybe by the latest and greatest Christian teaching that I hadn't really researched. So we want our kids to have these tools so that when they step out, right, if I got to go to prison for my beliefs in the future because I'm not going to embrace another culture, I want to know that the reason I do is because I'm backed up by the creator of the universe, and he has my back. Not that I've stepped out on some philosophy of man or motivation.
I think it comes back to discernment. And sometimes we can look at discernment as, well, it's a feeling. It's we can, kind of look at it and relegate it to that realm. But discernment is more than just a gut feeling. There's some people that have like almost a gift of discernment, but you need tools. And so you need the knowledge, you need understanding, you need to actually study some of this stuff. Discernment isn't this magical little thing that just you have it or you don't. It's something that requires work on our part.
Right.
And so we have to learn discernment. We have to invest in the tools for our own sake. So when we're evaluating curriculum, we're evaluating teachers, we're bringing everything, just like the Bereans did, back to the Word of God. And then we need to pass that on to our children. And that's a little harder because we have ways that we're applying it in our life. We're not really exposing our children purposely to things that are off. And so, we don't encounter those things practically.
Right.
And so when something like what came up with Elijah, that was really good because he could apply that and understand that in that moment.
Yes.
But it's something that's easy to just kind of forget about. And so it's really important, especially in the high school years, that we begin to give our students those tools to be able to discern.
Right. Especially as the student moves from more concrete thinking in the elementary levels to the junior high levels and above, where they're developing more abstract thought.
Yes.
And they're pulling in things from a lot of sources. Over the years, we've seen a lot of times where people will use a Christian homeschool curriculum, but they will allow secular influences, right? The internet, family members, sports teams, whatever, to have equal voice without actually teaching the student how to always use the biblical model as a standard to judge things against. And then they get out of the home and immediately walk away from their faith. It was like it was compartmentalized, but the real world didn't contain it. And Master Books electives, while they're great for electives and on a transcript, they're about so much more. They're about life prep. They're about preparing your student to defend themselves in a culture that has completely turned against the gospel message. And I think we need to teach our kids that we live in a broken world. I had the analogy we talked about. God was amazing at creation in that he put a self-destruct button, so to speak, in creation. And when Adam and Eve sinned and they fell, the self-destruct in creation, the button had been pressed. And we all experience that. And our children need to understand this utopia, this man can achieve godlike status of humanism, just does not work. We can't. We live in a broken world, and people will disappoint us. Culture is breaking down. There's only one hope for man, and that is the hope of Jesus Christ. And we want our kids to understand that and be able to articulate that. Because if they can't, the world will sell them that they are good enough to be able to overcome their deficiencies. We are good enough as people to achieve godlike status. That ability of being in a creation that doesn't have brokenness, that was forfeited long ago when the button was pressed and they ate of the fruit. And so that's what I love about Master Books curriculum. It's the curriculum itself is intentional. The history is providential. The literature is designed to be able to teach students how to communicate. Not the literature, the writing is designed to teach students how to communicate their ideas and their thoughts, because we need good communicators. Mm-hmm. We really do. And then it's also teaching them how to think critically and logically, mm-hmm. so that they can defend themselves against the messages.
Right.
So that is pretty much a brief summary of the master books. I talked a little bit about the transcripts. HSLDA is where I referred everybody to go to some samples.
HSLDA, at least I used to haven't looked in a long time, but when I've used their recommendations, there's 3 levels that they give you of diplomas for requirements of what courses you ought to be taking.
Yep. General.
Yep.
Average college prep,
right,
and then a rigorous college prep.
Right. And so that's what I personally try to follow when I'm creating my.
And they have templates. They also have links to, because I know we've used some of the Transcript Pro or some of the, we initially taken some of those things
mm-hmm.
too. So we've graduated 5,
mm-hmm.
and we've had college students from that. We've also had students that have gone directly into the workforce. Mm-hmm. So we've played around with both. Once you understand this, it's not that complicated. It really isn't. So I think you just have to do your homework and become. What are you doing over there, Brittany? You're really distracted. Brittany's playing with filters on her phone while we're talking.
Goodness.
That's just not good. Thanks, Brett.
Once you familiarize yourself with how it all works, it's really not so hard.
Yeah.
It really isn't. One thing though that I would like to say is, we sometimes focus on college and what they're going to get hit with in college, but for students that are not going on to college, and that they're not going on to college, they're going to transition directly into the workforce or whatever it is that they have planned. You don't need to go to college to have your faith attacked. And, our kids are bombarded, whether they go directly into the workforce, whether they go into college or not. I guess I'm not prepared for this discussion. So the danger with college is that these professors are purposely trying to root out your kid's faith, and they've developed a skill. We've talked about them being anointed for that in a bad way. And they have perfected the skill. And so year to year, they have a fresh group of kids to practice on.
Right. And obviously that's a generalization. We know that there are college professors that are godly in the system, but we've had those professors contact us and say, oh my goodness, the people I work with are intentionally trying to strip away faith. Like they believe it's the mission, their mission and the mission of the college to strip away the fairy tales and the faith so that they can be real thinkers, and giving us that warning.
And then there's the danger in the Christian colleges of these professors that have gone way off base And that's
sometimes even
worse because they're not suspecting. So it's crucial that we teach our kids always a biblical worldview, regardless of who it is that's teaching it, preaching it,
yes,
or whatever. But for the kids that are going off into just a regular job, into the workplace, they face a whole different tidal wave that comes against them and their Christianity. And you know, even if they're just going to get married and say be a stay-at-home mom, it doesn't matter what route you take. As these kids enter into adulthood, the culture has become so degraded, so lost, that all of our kids are going to face these heavy-duty things that they need a good, solid foundation of discernment and practical application for their faith in order to stand. So I just don't want to come across that, well, it's really important if your kid's going off to college, because it's really important no matter what your kids are doing, because it's not a Christian-focused society anymore.
Right.
It used to be, and that is just slowly being eroded and replaced by thinking that's just wrong,
right,
and not biblical. And
my
so
excitement,
we need to rip them all.
My excitement today comes from the fact that the potential of 100,000 kids being trained in Christian apologetics, in biblical worldview, in ability to communicate. 100,000 isn't that much when you look at how much curriculum we sold this year and the number of families we have. That excites me because you can't help but have 100,000 of anything and not impact culture.
Absolutely.
So we applaud you, we support you. Can I tell you one last thing? Or not. We serve a living God. And because of that, we have the ability to pray and ask for wisdom. And so when you approach high school with your student, and I would encourage you to do this with your student, even though I haven't always been good at this, but to pray and ask God to give wisdom. He knows the path that they're going to take in their life, the skills they need, the things that they're going to need. My goodness. And there's allergens.
Is that it?
And he alone knows how to equip the student. We don't have to do this on our own. As believers, we can ask him to give us wisdom. We have the Holy Spirit as a comforter, a coach, a counselor. He is the best academic advisor you will ever have with your kids.
Absolutely.
And so Master Books is awesome. We love the curriculum. We love the mission. But we encourage you to really seek the leading of the Holy Spirit in your homeschool and working with your kids. And we pray for you. We pray for this community repeatedly because we know the challenges you face. And especially as your kids become homeschoolers, and we've seen it now launching 5 kids. Holy cow, we thought toddlers were tough. Our kids aren't tough, it's just our hearts.
Yes.
Letting your kids go and letting them experience the bumps and the bruises of leaving and the collision with culture is tough. And the more that we do this with our older kids, the more purposeful we've become to at least have as thick skin as possible. All right, so I've been everywhere. We've invited people in. We've had Brittany distracting. Aubrey didn't call only because I'm in a different office and she doesn't know where I am. So I pray this was a blessing. I really do want to have more discussions about the high school experience with Master Books because it is an important part of what we do. And even though we have a lot of discussion about younger grades, high school is still a vital part of the Master Books experience, right?
It's crucial.
Yes. So thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. And God bless you. On Thursday, we'll be continuing our discussion on motivating the student. We'll be talking about different styles.
Is that another one at our house?
Yeah.
At my desk?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of activity possibly going on Thursday, so yeah. I'm just notating this because...
Or we'll be moving into the camper. One of the two will be broadcasting somewhere on that. Okay. And talking about like the special needs student, the gifted student, and maybe the delayed student. where the expectation is they just haven't matured enough. I think those are the three that I'd like to talk about this week with you.
Late birthdays.
Yeah, late bloomers. So if only I had been schooled when I was 40, I would have been like an excellent student. Okay. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic day.